In the electric hush of a packed studio audience, under the glaring lights of one of America's most iconic talk shows, Oprah Winfrey leaned forward with that signature blend of charisma and authority, her voice slicing through the air like a well-honed blade. "Senator Kennedy," she said, her eyes twinkling with what seemed like playful mischief but carried an undercurrent of disdain, "with all due respect, your folksy Southern charm and those Bible-thumping speeches, it's like watching a bad comedy sketch. You're a joke in Washington, aren't you? How do you expect anyone to take you seriously?" The audience gasped, a ripple of shockwaves spreading through the rows of seats, as cameras zoomed in on the silver-haired senator from Louisiana, John Neely Kennedy, whose face remained as steady as a bayou oak. In that frozen moment, millions watching at home held their breath, unaware that what followed would not just silence the room but ignite a firestorm of reflection across the nation. To understand how they arrived at this crossroads, one must rewind to the roots of two lives that couldn't have been more different, yet both forged in the crucible of American dreams and hardships. Oprah Winfrey, born in the rural poverty of Kosciuszko, Mississippi, in 1954, knew struggle from her earliest breaths. Abandoned by her teenage mother, raised by a grandmother who taught her to read from the Bible before she could tie her shoes, Oprah's childhood was a tapestry of abuse, neglect, and unyielding resilience. She escaped into books, into stories that promised a world beyond the dirt roads and hand-me-down clothes. By her teens, she was reciting poetry on local radio, her voice a beacon that drew listeners in like moths to a flame. But the scars ran deep. Sexual abuse at the hands of relatives left her pregnant at 14, a child she lost prematurely, burying the pain in silence. It was this raw vulnerability that fueled her ascent, from Nashville news anchor to Chicago morning show host, where her empathy turned, The Oprah Winfrey Show, into a cultural phenomenon. She became the queen of daytime TV, a billionaire philanthropist, opening schools in South Africa and championing causes from women's rights to mental health. Yet, beneath the gloss, Oprah carried a skepticism toward traditional institutions, including organized religion and politics, shaped by her own battles against hypocrisy she saw in the church and the corridors of power. On the other side of the spectrum stood John Neely Kennedy, a man whose life read like a Southern Gothic novel infused with Horatio Alger optimism. Born in 1951 in Centerville, Mississippi, not far from Oprah's own birthplace, Kennedy grew up in a modest family where faith wasn't just Sunday mornings but the very air they breathed. His father, a small-town lawyer, instilled in him the value of hard work and moral clarity, quoting scripture over dinner and debating politics with a twinkle in his eye. Young John excelled in school, earning scholarships to Vanderbilt, then Oxford, and finally the University of Virginia Law School. But his path wasn't without thorns. A bout with severe asthma as a child left him bedridden for months, forcing him to confront mortality early. He turned to prayer during those long nights, finding solace in the Psalms that promised strength in weakness. Entering politics as a Democrat before switching to Republican in 2007, Kennedy rose through Louisiana's ranks, state treasurer, then U.S. Senator in 2017. Known for his aw shucks demeanor, thick drawl, and razor-sharp wit, he championed fiscal conservatism, religious freedom, and rural America. Yet, critics dismissed him as a caricature, a hillbilly philosopher, more suited to a front porch than the Senate floor. Kennedy's faith was his anchor. But it also made him a target in an increasingly secular world, where belief was often equated with backwardness. Their worlds collided not by accident but through the machinations of a high-stakes media event. It was 2024, a year of political turbulence with elections looming and cultural divides widening like fault lines. Oprah, ever the influencer, had launched a new special series on her network, Conversations That Matter, aiming to bridge gaps between celebrities, politicians, and everyday Americans. Inviting Senator Kennedy seemed like a bold move, a conservative firebrand on a platform often seen as progressive. The topic: faith in the modern world. Oprah saw it as an opportunity to challenge what she viewed as outdated dogmas. Kennedy accepted, hoping to humanize his beliefs. Behind the scenes, tension simmered. Oprah's producers whispered about Kennedy's quirky style, while his aides warned him of potential ambushes. The audience, a mix of Oprah superfans, political junkies, and undecided voters, buzzed with anticipation as the lights dimmed and the show began. The interview started cordially enough. Oprah shared anecdotes from her own spiritual journey, her Baptist upbringing, her shift toward a more inclusive, New Age spirituality that emphasized personal empowerment over rigid doctrine. Kennedy nodded politely, interjecting with folksy analogies. "Ma'am, faith is like gumbo. Everyone's recipe is a bit different, but it's the love you put in that makes it nourishing." The crowd chuckled, warming to his charm. But as the conversation deepened into politics, Oprah pressed harder. "Senator, your opposition to certain social issues, abortion, LGBTQ rights, stems from your faith. But in today's world, doesn't that make you out of touch?" "A relic," Kennedy responded thoughtfully, drawing from his own life. "I've seen faith heal wounds that medicine couldn't touch. When my mama passed from cancer, it was the community's prayers that carried us. I don't impose my beliefs, I represent folks who feel forgotten." The exchange grew heated, with Oprah citing statistics on youth suicide rates in conservative states, implying religious intolerance as a culprit. Then came the moment that would define the evening. Frustrated by Kennedy's unflappable calm, Oprah delivered her jab, the joke comment that echoed through the studio. It wasn't scripted, but born from a flash of irritation, perhaps rooted in her own unresolved pains from a childhood church that failed to protect her. The audience's gasp was palpable, some tittered nervously, others shifted uncomfortably. Kennedy paused, his eyes locking onto Oprah's with a depth that transcended the cameras. He didn't lash out or retreat. Instead, he leaned back, a small smile playing on his lips, and began to speak in that slow, deliberate drawl that belied his Oxford education. "Ms. Winfrey," he said, his voice steady as a sermon, "I reckon you've earned the right to your opinions, having climbed mountains I can't even imagine. But callin' a man a joke for holdin' to his faith, well, that's like mockin' the roots of the tree that shades you. Let me tell you a story from my life, one I don't share often." The room fell silent, every eye riveted. Kennedy recounted his childhood asthma, the nights he wheezed for breath, praying not just for healing but for purpose. "Doctors said I'd never run a mile, but faith taught me endurance. Then, years later, when I lost my first election, feelin' like a failure, it was that same faith that whispered, 'Get up, son. There's work to do.'" He paused, his gaze softening toward Oprah. "I see your journey too, from that little girl in Mississippi who turned pain into power. We're not so different. We've both been mocked, doubted. But faith isn't a punchline. It's the quiet strength that turns jokes into leaders." As he spoke, something shifted in Oprah. Her poised facade cracked, tears welling in her eyes, not from defeat, but recognition. She remembered her grandmother's Bible lessons, the ones that sparked her love for stories, and how she'd distanced herself from them in pursuit of broader truths. The audience, sensing the raw humanity, erupted not in boos or cheers, but in a stunned applause that built like thunder. Kennedy continued, addressing the crowd, "In this divided world, we forget that behind every label, liberal, conservative, believer, skeptic, is a story of hurt and hope. Mockery builds walls, understanding builds bridges." He extended a hand to Oprah, who took it, her voice breaking as she admitted, "Senator, you've given me something to think about tonight." The aftermath was profound. Clips went viral, sparking national conversations on civility and faith. Oprah issued a reflective statement, praising Kennedy's grace and announcing a follow-up episode on interfaith dialogue. Kennedy, true to form, downplayed the drama, but privately, it reaffirmed his commitment to authenticity. For Oprah, it was a turning point, leading her to explore her roots more deeply, even visiting her childhood church. Challenges abounded. Critics accused Kennedy of performative piety, while some of Oprah's fans felt she went too soft. But resolutions emerged. New alliances formed, with the two collaborating on a charity event for at-risk youth, blending Oprah's empowerment focus with Kennedy's faith-based initiatives. In the end, the story of that night wasn't about winners or losers, but about the power of vulnerability. It reminded a fractured nation that beneath the barbs and banter, we're all navigating the same stormy seas of doubt and belief. The inspiring message: in a world quick to mock, responding with empathy and story can shock not just an audience, but hearts, proving that true strength lies not in tearing down, but in lifting up. And perhaps, just perhaps, that's the real miracle.